They did not speak, but marked the weight of rain, tracked shadow's arc across the open plain. Hands found in stone what tongues had yet to shape, and in the earth a grammar took its place. Not minds of myth, nor beasts in upright form, they moved with reason, unadorned, pre-worn. What others learned in speech they drew from ground, through shape and force the future turned around. At Adam's brow, where ridges cut the sky, they set the circle, watched the sun pass by. Not gods they praised, but angles they could see. A sky that turned became geometry. The stone returned what thought could not yet frame, a cycle known, though no one named its name. With no inscription, yet with perfect trace, they fixed the world by learning how it faced. In Nabta's dust the radials aligned, a clock of stone composed in solar mind, no monument but tool, a guiding frame, to read recurrence not by myth but flame. They shaped the year in quiet symmetry, where structure held the sun's fidelity. The future stood before them, not in text, but in the angle where the light would rest. In caves of horn and ochre-streaked descent, they opened ritual with pigment spent. At Lasgil, panels bent the walls to frame what hand and herd and hunger came to name. Figures stepped forth from stone into design. A narrative took shape, event by sign. No longer just a place to weather rain, the shelter staged the drama in the brain. Where Tassili spread its broken sea of rock, the body folded, forms began to walk. Not human, not quite beast, half drift, half gaze. Abstraction pulled the image into maze. There symbols split from earthly root and lore, and thought began to dream of what it saw. The wall no longer pictured, but became a veil, a vision, something not the same. At Kalambo, timber locked in seam, a cross of joinery revealed the scheme. Not merely built, but balanced, set with care, where structure taught the mind what thought could bear. The join was law, the timber held the rule. The act of making bent the world to tool. Not hands alone, but systems built the span where memory could rise as shape from man. They raised the ridge that wound through forest deep, a living line that charted boundaries keep. At Sungbo's trench, the scale itself was will. To draw the edge was to impose the still. The earth obeyed their unspoken domain, a logic vast as distance, tight as chain. Not just a wall, but thought made wide and raw. Yeah, the land itself transformed by inner law. In Oyo's field and Aoife's iron cast, they gave the form of kinship shape at last. The face was self, the pose a silent thread, a lineage placed in metal, stone, and head. Here sculpture wasn't mark, it was a voice. Identity no longer guessed, but choice. The spatial right of who and where and why stood sculpted in the gaze that would not die. They built Adulis not to stand alone, but as a system etched in glyph and stone. The city spoke, its water, streets and gate aligned as sign and not as random state. Each mark a function, every wall a line that carried law in form, not just design. The written world collapsed into the real. The building lived the very rule it sealed. Where Mapungubwe climbed above the plain, the body rose by status, weight and gain. To lie above was not just place, but right. The height itself encoded class in light. Gold whispered rank, and graves obeyed the form. No symbol stood apart from rule and norm. They built the shape of structure as decree, an architecture of inequality. The granite curve of Zimbabwe enclosed what silence, form and memory composed. Here, walls became the voice the law had made. The gate, the code, the shadow and the shade. It was not rule that men enforced with sword, but space itself that carried out the word. To walk the plan was to recite the claim. The ground became the map, the right, the name. And last, where Napata rose from the red, they cut the mountain's flank where thought had led. Aligned to stars, the temple's carved facades spoke not to gods, but as the gods once trod. There, Symbol fused to space without divide, each axis turned where mind and mass collide. Not temple now, but operation done, a logic built where land and light are one.